Welcome to Trulyfit.
Chris, welcome to the Trulyfit Podcast. Why don't you give my listeners and audience a little background on who you are and what you do day to day in the health and fitness industry?
Steve, great to be here. So excited to be a guest on the podcast. So my name is Chris Manderino. I'm the co-founder at LyfeFuel. LyfeFuel is a complete nutrition company rooted in plant-based whole foods. Previous experience was as a professional NFL athlete, and then firsthand experience on kind of the medical side of nutrition, working in bariatrics. And for those who aren't familiar, that's weight loss surgery and medical weight management before deciding to take the entrepreneurial route and putting both that combined, I guess, experience as a professional athlete and then in the business side and medical side of nutrition to create what we've done at LyfeFuel.
What did you learn in bariatrics that maybe helped you, whether it was starting your career or making decisions based upon your company?
Oh, a ton. So I think, in bariatrics, obviously a pretty unique patient population, but a growing problem, epidemic really in the Western world. Just people really struggling with obesity and the people that coming in for weight loss surgery, depending on the type of surgery, it's really kind of the last, resort for many of them. They tried a bunch of different diets and just, couldn't get that to work for whatever reason. And so bariatric surgery was really kind of a tool that altered the anatomy, really controlled and restricted amount of food one could eat. And that was typically the catalyst to, reverse some of those chronic illnesses, really, and get the weight off. However, what I had learned is when, patients, regardless of whether they lost weight or not, those that took their nutrition really seriously and had adequate amounts of protein and all the micronutrients had way better outcomes. They looked a lot healthier. The type of weight they lost was, more fat focused and not lean muscle wasting and those types of things versus those who didn't take, their nutrition seriously. Although they had lost weight, they looked quite sickly, hair loss, just, saggy skin, just, you could see it in their eyes and their face, the color of everything because they were undernourished. And so, when you change the anatomy and when you have, that type of restricted eating, it becomes a lot more difficult to get, all the nourishment you need from food alone. And so that supplementing and complementing their regular diet with the proper targeted nutritional supplements was a key to their success. And it was during that time where I saw, much broader problem, I guess, existing in American society where we're not getting the same nutrition from food that we once were. And so you have this problem of not necessarily nutritional deficiency, although that does affect, certain subsets of the population, is nutrition insufficiency. And it's kind of like this silent thing where your body's taking, key nutrients from where it can get it just to kind of survive, essentially. And Bruce Ames has interesting theory around this topic. It's called the nutritional triage theory of aging, which posits when you're depleted or insufficient in essential vitamins and minerals, basically you're sacrificing long-term health for short-term survival.
Yeah, they talk a lot about that now in the recent studies. People always argue about how much protein should you have, right? What percentage of your diet should be protein? And now they're showing a lot of longevity studies because that's what people are focused on now, right? It's not just vanity, it's longevity that shows, you can have a certain number of what you consider adequate amount of protein, and that might make you build muscle and look better. But as far as longevity is concerned, that's not always the best thing for you to have a diet that's extremely rich in protein.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, right? There's a balance to everything. And it really comes down to your goals as well. So if you're, a bodybuilder and you're trying to compete, at a high level, then, your protein needs are going to be very different than the average person. So I think depending on your physical fitness and kind of what you're trying to optimize for, those protein, intakes, vary. But I think, the role of protein in the diet is really paramount. It is, I mean, what it breaks down to is the structural building blocks of, the lean muscle and the satiety factor, right? When you really build your meal around protein, not to overconsume protein, but really around protein, that will keep you full for longer. It's going to help mitigate against, seeking out less desirable foods because you're, have all these other cravings and stuff like that. So, protein is obviously essential, but I think we overestimate, maybe the amount of protein we might need depending on, if we're extremely physically active or if we're, just living a sedentary lifestyle where we're not getting much physical activity, then you probably don't need as much.
Sure, yeah. And in the social media age, most people take their advice from people who don't actually live similar lives to them. So there's a guy who is on all sorts of illicit drugs who weighs 280 pounds with 7% body fat, who, of course, he's telling you that he's eating 290 grams of protein a day. That doesn't mean you, the 170-pound guy who's an accountant, who's sitting at his desk and maybe works out 3 times a week, also needs to eat 280 grams of protein.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to put undue stress on, some of the essential, the organs, kidneys, and all that. Just trying to break down and process all that protein. At the end of the day, it really comes down to what you can actually absorb and utilize. So it's not just the absolute number of protein, but it's the quality of that protein. And that goes for any food or nutrient as well, right? So that's where they have different ways to measure protein quality and protein digestibility. The kind of gold standard for that for a long time was the PDCAS score, which is now evolved, and you got the DVAS score or whatever. That is kind of a marker of, okay, based off these proteins and how they get absorbed and digested, this is like the utilization of it. And so there is, certain, you can get into different things on this, but there's like also the leucine threshold, right? What amount of leucine do you need per meal, essentially, to maintain muscle protein synthesis versus going into muscle protein breakdown? And again, that goes back to the BCAA breakdown of the foods and the types of proteins and the digestibility of all that.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of arguments now, and I guess you would call it like the biological value of certain proteins and how they're digested. There was a documentary that was out recently, sort of promoting more vegan-based dietary habits, that was saying, it's kind of antiquated, the process that they were using beforehand, and now that we're able to maybe assess lower, this is beyond my scope, but in the duodenum or something, they were able to find that no, we're digesting vegan proteins to the same extent of a biological value as some of the other proteins where we didn't think that was the case.
Yeah, and there's more studies coming out, especially now that alternative proteins, plant-based proteins are kind of more actively sought out by consumer base. Now there's more funding, more research going into the biological value of this versus animal-based proteins. A lot of that is looking at the effects of pea and rice protein versus a whey-based protein, and the impact of muscle building over a certain trial duration. And some of those studies show that there's not really a primary difference between the two. And even with plant-based diets exclusively, the knock against plant-based proteins has always been, for the most part, they're incomplete sources of protein. But I think that's looking at things through a very narrow lens, assuming somebody is going to eat a single food all day, right? All you eat is peas, right? And that's the only way that you get your protein. But there's protein in vegetables, there's protein. You're getting it from a myriad of different sources, and your body knows what to do with all those different sources. And that's why you don't see protein deficiency exists, at all anymore, right? It's very, 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 very rare.
Yeah, that's a great argument. It's like saying, well, water doesn't have all the nutrients you need. Why are you going to drink water? It's like, well, because this is a puzzle, and we're not doing this in a vacuum. I'm not only allowed to have a vegan protein shake, right? I can also eat other things throughout the day. So people do have a really weird argument. They compare one to one without looking at, no. We're looking at the full spectrum of food that you would eat in a day. We're not just comparing one to one.
Yeah, and it's, you look at something like the Krebs cycle or metabolic process or any of these things, I mean, they're incredibly complex, right? And to try to distill, what we eat down into these like singular, like very simplistic things is kind of silly and naive when you think about all the different chemical and enzymatic processes that is happening when you ingest, eat, consume anything. The body is like working its magic to know how to utilize all that and serve us in the best possible way.
Yeah, not to mention we're also biodiverse. I would imagine, maybe you know more about this than I do, but if I'm an Alaskan Inuit and for 6 generations my family has been eating nothing but, let's say, meat and fish, and I haven't had a lot of vegetables, maybe it's harder for me to process these things because now my gut biome has been developed genetically, epigenetically through the years to now digest this other kind of food. Whereas in someone else who grew up in more of a grassy area where they had more access to fruits and vegetation, their gut biome might be different.
Absolutely. And that's the whole concept of bioindividuality. And so to look at anything in a vacuum and try to present one diet as being, the optimal diet is just foolish. You have to look at N of one experimentation and understanding what your personal needs and goals are, socioeconomics, genetics, gut microbiome, ancestry. There's so many different cofactors and tastes and preferences and all that, and enjoyability of the food and stuff that you're consuming at the end of the day, right? And the social aspect. So there's, all these different things that oftentimes get failed to take into consideration when just looking at, dietary theory, vegan versus keto, and all this stuff. While great, from kind of, I guess, a study standpoint, not necessarily transferable always to the individual. That's where you have to really fine tune things and figure out what your body uniquely needs.
Yeah, well said. And to add to that, or maybe put a bow on this, we had a physician who was dual board certified in interventional radiology and obesity medicine. And he figured out a way to use the interventional radiology through bariatrics to basically singe the hunger nerve, right?
Mm.
To cauterize it, for lack of a better term. And
Yeah.
that's great. That's a great start. But like you said, and afterwards, we still need the right nutrients, right? It's not just about helping on the front end to make sure people are eating less. They still need to know what to eat, and they need to eat the proper things to make sure that their body is functioning correctly. And that's a whole different side of medicine, right? That's not really what's touched on. We usually just do the first intervention, and then we leave it on the patient to figure out their own way. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, right? That's why there's so many of these surgeries that fail, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we often overlook the quality of food and get too consumed by, macronutrients or calories or some of these other tangents. But if we just got back to kind of eating a more ancestral diet, in an ideal world, we would all grow and raise all our own food, right? We would know exactly the inputs and outputs of that. Obviously, we're not going to spray that full of pesticides and chemicals and feed it, unnatural things. Unfortunately, that's not the food system that we have today, right? So you really have to be an advocate for your own health and seek out sources of a fuel that align with whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's really, if you can focus on the quality aspect, ask 10 questions, to your farmer, to your, grocer, wherever you're getting your food, then you're going to get closer to the outcome that you're seeking. But if you're just fixated on calories in, calories out, am I hitting my macro targets? You're overlooking a much more important criteria when making choices on food, and that is, what is the qualitative nature? What is the nutrient density of this? What's not in it? What was it fed? How was it raised? Those types of things. And the body has an amazing ability when fed with the proper, like, high quality nutritive fuel sources to partition that as it needs to. Your satiety, you're going to feel full, because if you ate, say, 1,000 calories of sweet potatoes versus 1,000 calories of Doritos, you'd
Sure.
be tasked to try to get through those 1,000 calories of sweet potatoes, but you might, jam through the Doritos and want another 1,000 or 2,000 calories after it. So that the qualitative and nutrient aspects of food really does matter.
Let's step away from the science and go to the marketing and development for a second. I'm assuming this, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that having bars is a nightmare Powder seems relatively easy, right? Oh, it's a powder. Most of them taste good. They have a flavor, whatever it is, chocolate, fudge, double chocolate, vanilla. I've had all the powders in the world. Majority of them taste well, especially for somebody who's been having them for a long period of time. You kind of understand the texture. Protein bars are also very different, right? The taste profiles, the textures, and more often than not, they're not very good. It's harder to
No.
me to make one. On top of that, you
Yeah.
also have to have individual packaging. Why did you decide to go this route? And tell me about the differences between making that and a powder.
Yeah, so, starting a bar was no, I guess, easy feat. And I'm certainly happy that it's not like our core focus due to some of the constraints and challenges that you express. I mean, margins on bars are, quite small. You got to sell a ton of them to really make it a viable business. So it's really a complementary product that's been good for us to just find another way for people to get the essential nutrients they need in a convenient on the go format. So when you don't have time to even make a shake, which sounds crazy, but it takes maybe 60 seconds to 2 minutes, that portable format that you can travel with and on the go and still get that full spectrum of vitamins and minerals was an interesting way to accomplish that. Plus, I think in terms of just getting an instant response and showcasing the brand and what it's about, the way that we develop the bars, being 100% real food base, every single one of our micronutrients is something that you can grow in your own backyard, in your garden. That to us became quite interesting and compelling because that's the road that we're going down now with the reformulation of our hero product, the essential shake. So that's really kind of our core value prop, is to be 100% real food nutrition. And there's less than 1% of nutrition supplement companies out there that are doing that and can say that in the way that we're doing it, the comprehensive nature of the products. And so that's innovation that exists today that didn't exist when we first started. The bars was kind of an easier route for us to go do that. Also, this satiety factor, we use a superfood in there, plus really high fiber to kind of help really do what a bar should do, which is kind of curb hunger between meals, right? It's not really intended to be the meal, but when you're in a pinch, you're on the go, you just need something to satiate you. A bar is a great way of doing that, as long as it's not loaded with a bunch of crap, which candidly a lot of bars are. They're just candy bars in disguise at the end of the day. So we feel like we did some special things with the bar. Obviously, getting it to taste great and all that was challenging. And now, shorter shelf life than what we have in powders. That's something that we're kind of trying to figure out as well, right? Being a newer product, trying to establish sales velocity, you've got, much shorter shelf life. And so trying to ramp it up, it's all kind of challenging, and then not kind of running into like wasted inventory and trying to offload the stuff if you've kind of haven't sold quite as quickly as you would when you've run those bars. So way more challenging for sure. But again, that's where, like, if we go out of stock on a bar, less of a financial impact for us than going out of stock on, our hero products, which are really the powdered formulations.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys are in stores. You can tell me that after this, but I will say when I'm inside of a store, whatever it is, it could be something like Target or something like a GNC. My eyes are always, because they're usually at that mid shelf level, are drawn to protein bars, whereas in the powders are not, right? Because most people are not
Yep.
going to those stores for that. So those are on the top shelf. I never even look
Yep.
there because when I buy my powders, I buy them online. I already have a
Hmm.
brand that I know, like, and trust, and I'm buying them through online. But bars, that's not the case because I want to try something novel here and there. So I go to the store, and maybe this is just anecdotal, but I assume this is how it works because that's why they sell them individually too in stores, not just in boxes, right? I can go to the store and go, I've never tried this one. This looks good. Let me look at the back of this. Oh, it has all natural ingredients. Boom. I grab it. So I do think there is an advantage from like a branding perspective to have a bar.
Absolutely. I think, at some point we'll look at exploring retail further. I mean, that's really the key, trying to grow. Like, if you're just trying to start a bar company without a retail presence, I think it's almost impossible, like extremely, extremely challenging. One, it's very competitive. And so like
Yeah.
the online space is tough, but even retail, to stand out on shelf, it's challenging. But I think that is where oftentimes that first experience happens. Somebody grabs one bar, two bars, whatever. It's new, it's novel. They like it. Now they're coming back. And so retail right now we don't, it's not something that we've pursued. We actually pulled out of, retail when we dabbled in it early on in our customer life cycle. We'll revisit it with the right opportunities, the right, organic retailers, and try to do that stage by stage. But I think that's like the pop-up displays and just kind of point of purchase, at checkout, like that's definitely a huge opportunity. And, maybe there's a different way to think about retail. Maybe it's integration with boutique fitness and stuff, which we've done a little bit of. And then you're kind of honing in on that direct, target demographic to then have that experiential kind of first impact with the brand, and then maybe recurring purchases come online. Because right now we just sell full boxes of bars online. Doesn't make sense for us economically to break those down into individual bars to sell, because just the cost of shipping alone would destroy any margin on them.
Yeah. Well, staying on that topic, convince a listener who wants to start a supplement company to not do it or to do it. What would you say?
Depends. I would really think about what is the unique problem that you're trying to solve. What is the unique value proposition of the product or products that you're looking to bring to market. I think in the supplement industry, there's a bunch of white label or private label, just me too stuff out there. So even in the protein space, I never sought out to start a protein powder or create a protein powder. To me, that's kind of a waste of money for consumers for the most part, and a waste of time from a business objective, because you're literally taking a commodity, throwing it in a bag and putting, a bunch of marketing on it. Whereas, what we've done, we really look at nutrition in a more comprehensive way. The same thing that when you bite into an apple, you're not just getting a single nutrient, right? You're getting a whole host of different vitamins, minerals, nutrients in that apple itself. And so we wanted to develop that in a line of convenient, functional foods that people can, really integrate into their daily routine. So, I think there's plenty of opportunity in the space, but you really have to dig deeper now and really understand, where those opportunities are, where there's kind of a niche where others are kind of not paying attention to, and try to develop a hero product around that. But I think the days of, trying to be like a Now Foods or, these companies that sell, 200 plus different SKUs, I don't think the consumer is really looking for that. I think it's, definitely a reductionist approach to nutrition as opposed to a holistic approach to nutrition. And, you can get a lot more bang for your buck with a complete nutrition source like what we've created at LyfeFuel, that still uses, high level science to, pinpoint these specific levels of key vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that are largely lacking or missing in modern diets. And then you've got kind of that therapeutic side where it's like, okay, I want to focus on longevity. Okay, well, what are the proven things out there that can maybe help with longevity, and maybe that's what it is. But yeah, private label supplements definitely don't recommend, unless you just got a boatload of money and you can just blow it out of the water on the marketing standpoint, because then it's just you're forcing yourself into existence, and you've got the money to be able to do that.
We might have buried the lead a little bit, so I want to go back to what you used to do prior to owning this company. You were a collegiate football player, and then you went to the NFL as a fullback. That's correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And I imagine at that point in your life, you were eating anything and everything to keep on weight and to keep on muscle, because you don't look like you're 250 pounds now, which you probably have to be as a fullback or close to it. Yep. So tell me now, I'm going to give you a scenario, right? A hypothetical here. I love hypotheticals. If you were working with, let's not even say NFL, let's say a collegiate team, and you had to sort of audit what they were doing food-wise, nutrition-wise. How do you think you could potentially help them? What would be your guidance? And now I know there's a huge difference between what a fullback and a cornerback and an offensive guard should eat and should do, but what are they maybe missing as far as nutrients are concerned and dietary habits?
That's a great question. I'd like to think that it's evolved since I've played, but there wasn't a lot of guidance at the time, right? You had, maybe a dietitian that would, help you kind of create a meal plan if you sought it out, or, if you were somebody that, really needed to gain weight or lose weight, you could kind of, get some assistance. But again, it was kind of, you know, macros, calories, eat these types of things, and fairly surface level. And so now at the collegiate level and certainly the professional level, I think a very interesting thing to do would be able to combine, in-depth diagnostic testing to better cater a nutritional game plan for the individual athlete. So that's taking into consideration, their micronutrient status, where they're at now, understanding, if they're depleted in any of these, essential vitamins, minerals, making sure they're getting adequate amounts of that through predominantly diet. So it would be focused around foods that are higher in those specific nutrient gaps, and then ensuring that, that is complementary to their training load and whatever their physical goals in terms of strength, body mass, and those types of things are, and be able to track that effectively over time, the same way that you're tracking, your increases in your squat and your bench and all that, right? This needs to be more interconnected. Whereas, I still, at least from my experience, nutrition is still kind of secondary to everything else that you're doing as an athlete. So I would just, make that switch to put it more at the forefront, and get, whoever those key decision makers are, the coaches or just the athletes themselves, to understand that nutrition can actually be this competitive advantage if you really take it seriously. And I know, again, based off my experience, it's really not. You have a lot of guys that are still eating, McDonald's and fine, right? They're still performing at a really high level, but you can't help to ask the question, well, what if we tried, what if you were more dialed in? Are you leaving something on the table as an athlete based off all the science that we have around nutrition? Are you able to recover faster, right? That's huge. So, you don't really know until you've kind of gotten into kind of the individual, what they're doing on a daily basis, and then have the buy-in from, coaching staff and the players themselves say, okay, yeah, I want to seek this out. And at the professional level, you definitely see it a lot more, guys that go on to have, 20-year careers. These guys are dialed in with their nutrition. It's just matter of fact at that point, and often gets overlooked when you're much younger at the collegiate age, because you can get away with a lot more.
Well, I think the key is it's not just the age, it's the fact that you're only in college for 3 or 4 years, and that a lot of these nutritional components, or what we call in economics lagging indicators, meaning you're doing things now that don't actually have a deleterious effect to you now, but that doesn't mean it's not going to down the road, right? So Chad Ochocinco and Marshawn Lynch talk about eating 3 bags of Skittles before the game, right? I think DK Metcalf still does. Yeah, okay, I get that. But you guys are young and you're at your prime of your life. That doesn't mean that's going to help you when you're 34, and that doesn't mean it's going to help you get to 34 and still be a professional athlete. So I think that's really the problem, is that it's not this instantaneous benefit always that you're going to see in nutrition. People go, oh, I took vitamins. Like, I don't feel any energy. That's what I have clients say. I don't have any energy from these vitamins. Like, that's not the purpose. Energy is and vitamins are not, those aren't synonyms. Like calories and energy are synonyms in the nutrition world, right? So people don't understand that these are lagging benefits or lagging indicators sometimes, and you have to stay the course to see the benefits.
Absolutely. And I think, even beyond the game itself, right? So you're eating a certain way while you're in the sport, right? You're trying to, pack on pounds, pack on muscle, but those habits that you develop at that point in time, especially in those collegiate years, high school years, those carry forward throughout life. And so that, I think, is even more important to think about, because I had, a lot of guys that I had played with that still eat like, we're sitting around, like we're training 2 days, just hammering the weights. And that was like our full-time job. Right. And because they didn't change or alter those habits, which are really tough to break when you've done something for so long, to change and now seek out the education and information about what you should eat and do. now for longevity is tough to make that switch. And so, if you can have those habits earlier on, those are going to carry forward with you long after you're done playing, and then help you maintain a normal body weight or get back to a normal body weight, and mitigate a lot of the inflammatory nature of some of those foods and just life in general. So I think it's really important to think about it from, a long-term longevity perspective, instead of just like, that short shelf life of being an athlete.
Staying on your career and training. I've actually talked to other collegiate fullbacks before, never an NFL fullback, but certainly people who are high level athletes in all different sports. And you will hear some of them say they actually hate lifting now because it was a punishment, right? To wake up 5 a.m. every day and have to sometimes be tortured, basically lift until you're puking, right? You're pushed to your limits. You build sort of a negative affiliation with the lifting. Do you feel that? Have you sort of maybe also have a more well-rounded approach, and you're not just doing, traditional lifting that you would assume a fullback is, and that you're doing mobility work and stretching and things of that nature now?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved in phases. Like, I'm 41 years old now, and so I'm definitely not training at the same level that I was when I was playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
But there was a chapter when I was done playing in the NFL that I was still kind of doing a lot of the workouts in a similar fashion, especially from the weight-based side. I got into CrossFit for a while, and I really enjoyed kind of the competitive nature. It really was that outlet for me of, finding that during that post-athletic career. However, that started to take a toll on my body, and it was just beating me down, right? And so, I think mobility, as a result, started to suffer. Old injuries that I had incurred from playing football, everything becomes a lot more painful. And so I came to the realization that, okay, maybe CrossFit is no longer the best modality for me from a day-to-day training standpoint. What can I do to adapt this? And so even today, I still use, I think having a program, having a plan is really important, and kind of the progressive nature of weight training, resistance training is really, it's just fundamental if you want to, experience gains, but it doesn't need to mean I'm squatting 400 plus pounds on a Monday morning, right? So there's definitely more focused effort on flexibility, mobility. The time spent on training is way more efficient. I might have an hour-ish a day to get that done. But for me, it's so important to my daily routine because it helps, keep stress under control. It's that nice, mental outlet. It serves me in so many other ways beyond just the physical aspect of it. And it's a good balance to everything I experience day to day as an entrepreneur, the ups and downs of that, and just having that time for myself to be able to kind of continue to work on my health, work on my body, and, and listen, and just be in tune with what's going on, and being able to take a step back, because I'm not training for, to hit linebackers in the mouth, twice a day, all day long. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I agree. It's great to have a plan, and it's also great to deviate from that plan if you're not feeling great, right? So you go in, you do your dynamic warm up. Maybe you had a plan written out for the day and you're like, you know what? My shoulder's cranky. Most of this plan involved a lot of pushing exercises. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to go on a 2-mile jog and call it quits. And then tomorrow I'll maybe reassess to see if I can go through this plan. I think that's important. And not everyone can do that, especially if they come from a background like you did, where things were maybe a little bit more structured and they're used to just pushing themselves and going, well, my coach wouldn't allow me to deviate. We had a plan in place. We had a 3:00 practice. Yeah. I had to, do the Oklahoma drill. So I'm going to go do the Oklahoma drill. So it's good that you're able to sort of step back and reassess and understand that you don't have to do it that way anymore.
It's not easy. It's definitely not easy, because there's still that voice in your head that's like, come on, you've got to do this. It's on the paper, you got to finish. But, not listening to my body, I've definitely hurt myself. And so the setbacks of those injuries, put you back, an extra week, 2, 3, 4, sometimes worse. Right. So having done that enough times, now it's like, okay, just listen to the other side and say, okay, if you're not feeling it, there's no harm in, taking a step back, reloading it in for the day, focusing on something else, just focus on mobility or whatever. Because again, unless you're training for something, and even if you are, an injury and the, time you lose as a result of that injury is like way worse than squeezing out an extra rep or two and the, small gains that you might get as a result of that.
Yeah, I think even in sports now, there's this misguided notion that there is no line of diminishing returns. Like, oh, I can just keep working at strength. It's like, no. Not only is the risk for injury now greater, which is, we've seen more injuries now than we ever have before. And yet we're supposed to have more orthopedists and more people who understand kinesiology and the body and nutrition and health. Why are we seeing more injuries? Well, people are pushing their bodies to such extremes, and they're almost like too muscular. Sometimes you see these NFL athletes, I see these wide receivers. I'm like, well, you can't, of course you have this hamstring injury. Like, look at your legs. Like, they're almost, they're too built up for your particular position and what you're doing all the time. So I do think there will be eventually this more Tom Brady approach, kind of reverting back to saying like, okay, I want longevity for my career, and I need to do a little bit more feeling out and focus on my diet and not focus so much on just pushing it to the absolute limit. But that comes from people who maybe like you down the road they ask people like me to come in and say, hey, can you audit this program? Like, what exactly are we doing wrong here? Because they've been doing the same thing since 1985, really, right? There hasn't been a huge change, right? They're still going in. They still have the same squat racks. They still have the same goals. The programs have not changed that much. And I hope they do develop over the years, both for the players' sake, for their long-term health and wellness, so they're not crippled at 50, and for performance sake, because I think the performance will actually become better.
I agree 100%. And I would say similar to how nutrition is really an afterthought or, secondary, I think mobility and flexibility has also been that way from a strength and conditioning side of things. There's always, okay, make sure we hit, the weight's heavy. Oh, and if we have time to stretch before or after, like that's a bonus, but it really comes down to, especially in athletics, like what is the force, right, that you're generating, and that requires, yes, strength, but it also requires the mobility and flexibility to ensure that muscle is able to explode and use that full range of motion and all that. So if you only have one, if you're just super buff and muscular, but you don't have that mobility and flexibility, then the application of that muscle is reduced, right? So you definitely need to find more of a balance between the two sides, and I agree. I think some of that should, and maybe it starts as a trickle down where, the guys that have seen what Brady did and all that, it starts in the NFL and then kind of makes its way down into the college ranks and then even, earlier on.
Yeah. And like we talked about before with the, individuality and the biodiversity of food, the same thing goes for, I compare everything to football, but sort of a crude analogy is like a cornerback needs different things than an offensive guard, right? Maybe the offensive guard can spend way more time bench pressing because that's a means to which he has to dominate. But the cornerback, that's not necessarily the case, right? So if he's spending all of his time benching and worrying about, his ability to strengthen his shoulders and chest, he's not spending that time on being able to, have better footwork. So
agility and other things.
Yeah. So what do you want to spend your time on? And I think that's really the problem. And again, that falls into the food world too. What is your goal? Yeah, this worked for this person, but do they have the same exact goals as you and the same exact body type as you do? And I think people overlook that. Now let's go back to your supplements, your key supplements. What exactly do you feel like you guys have that the other competitor brands do not have, whether that is particular nutrients, the amount of the nutrients, or maybe just synergistically how they work?
Yeah, so our hero product is the Essentials Nutrition Shake. It falls into that foundational nutrition meal replacement shake category. But what we did differently with that product is we really looked at what are the key vitamins and minerals that are largely lacking or missing in modern diets, and what are the science-based levels of those nutrients that we all need to have that functional baseline, essentially. For example, vitamin D3 plus K2. We've got more D3, K2. I mean, most products in our category either don't use D3 or K2 at all. They use inferior sources using D2, and they don't use K2 at all. But that's so critical for ensuring that calcium gets out of the arteries and goes into the bones where it belongs. And vitamin D3 works more like a hormone in the body than it does an actual vitamin. It's involved in so many different processes and all that. So to not have D3 and K2 in a quote unquote complete nutritional formulation, you're just overlooking the science, right? So some products in our space that your listeners might be familiar with, something like an AG1 or a Kachava or a Huel. AG1, it's got a very comparable vitamin and mineral mix to what we have, but there's no protein and there's no D3K2. You've got to take that as a separate product. A lot of the meal replacement shakes, they kind of, will check the box on the amount of nutrients. Okay, we've got 10 to 20% across the board, 21 different micronutrients, but they didn't look at, the different levels of what you're probably already getting enough of through diet alone, and which ones were more at risk of not getting through our food sources due to the changing nature of the food, the loss of nutrient density of the soil in which foods are grown, and those types of things. And so that's where, yes, to your point, all three of those things, there's specific nutrients that we have that others don't. The synergistic nature of those products, again, one of our closest competitors has 600 milligrams of calcium in their product alongside, a lot of these other kind of, things that look great on paper. But the reality is, with that much calcium in a product, it forces out the absorption of some of those other key vitamins and minerals. And so these things do need to work synergistically. And it's not just, okay, more of everything is better, even though that's usually the American mentality. More is always better. That's not the case when it comes to nutrition. Better is better. More targeted is what you need. And that's where, our formulations really stand out. Plus, we don't put a lot of like simple carbohydrates and other unnecessary fluff or fillers in. Carbs are not an essential nutrient, and so therefore we just focused on really the nutrient density. What we're doing in an updated formulation is we're leaning into being 100% real whole foods, similar to what I mentioned that we've already done in our bars. And we'll be one of the only products that I'm aware of that can say and do that and still have those therapeutic levels of a lot of those essential vitamins and minerals, exclusively sourced from real whole foods. And so that's going to increase the absorption or the bioavailability of all that. It's going to be more in line with what our bodies crave and what they need, versus synthetic vitamins and minerals, which are chemically created in a lab, usually start with sources that might shock a lot of people, like petroleum and coal tar and, just a lot of the weird stuff that exists in the supplement space that consumers are not necessarily privy to. But our guess is that, people who are, taking a proactive approach to health will start to ask these questions around supplements. We're asking these questions now. Okay, where's my food coming from? How's it grown? What's in it? What's in, I'm avoiding seed oils, these types of things. I think the next big question to ask is, how are my supplements made? Where are these ingredients coming from? What's the difference between synthetic, B12 and, methylated B12? And you've got some, thought leaders that are now starting to lead the charge on that. And, that's where we're going as a company. And we'll be really kind of forward facing in that regard as well, to bring all that to the consumers who really demand the best for their bodies.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really hitting every angle. You're hitting okay, we don't just have 10% of every vitamin, because that doesn't make any sense. We need to see what people are deficient in. Maybe you get enough of this, so we have less than 10%. Maybe you don't get enough of this, so we have 18%, right? That makes sense. You're making sure that you don't have too much of things that maybe have the same uptake transport channels, right? If there's too much calcium here, that's blocking the magnesium from getting in. What the hell's the point of taking all the calcium? And then you also have the other final end of the spectrum to say, well, how we develop these, we're not using all these synthetic chemicals, and we're putting them in weird labs in places we don't know what's going on with the sort of the QA process. And, we have an ability to do that. And I think, like you said, the people who are going to be paying for supplements down the road, and at least often, right, on a weekly, monthly, yearly, for the rest of their life basis, are people who you would think are looking into those particular things.
Yeah, we see that with our customer base. We get those questions all the time. People, they're avid label readers. They're understanding the distinction, the reason why we use 500 micrograms of methyl B12 versus just cyanocobalamin. All these different nuances, and so I think that more informed population is finding a way to LyfeFuel. Whereas, mass market, maybe it's not, right? Because they don't understand, yet the value that these little intricacies really do make. And again, it's all about what you absorb at the cellular level. And that's where seeking out these higher quality sources of nutrients has a major impact over long term. That's where, you said, a vitamin doesn't equate to energy. However, like when it gets into the cellular, when you improve the metabolic process, and nutrients
Sure.
being a foundational element of that, your energy levels will naturally improve without dependence on caffeine and those types of things. When you're robbing the mitochondria essentially of the core nutrients it needs, it's not going to function as it should. And so the currency of that is really increased energy by fixing some of those processes.
Yeah, I think the word is spreading to, in my community and more of the fitness based community. We're not supposed, it's a fine line what personal trainers can and can't do with their clients, right? As far as like,
Yeah.
hey, should we touch on diet stuff? It's not actually illegal insofar as it could be in certain states, but insofar as we're not allowed to give information to them. But
Yeah.
it is frowned upon by a lot of, let's say, the certifications, yet everyone does it. There
Sure.
is no, if you're concerned
Which
with someone,
is
it's normal.
sorry. Yeah. And it's kind of silly, right? Because, people are seeking out your guidance and your expertise. And again, I think, it's kind of, it should be, something that as a trainer, you seek some of this knowledge out, and you can, at least be a sounding board for your clientele to help them make more informed choices, right? I think, if you don't do that, same way, if you want to see, I don't know, I think the problem with the food system, right? Like you've got a whole system of healthcare that has nothing to do with diet, and diet that has nothing to do with health. It's just disconnected. And so when people are coming to kind of a personal trainer or, the local gym owner, I think they're looking for additional advice because most people don't really have any clue. And that's why they're kind of going to people in the first place to help them with
Sure.
these problems. So. But to
Yeah. And
make a specific recommendation, that's where you have to kind of tread lightly, obviously, because you don't know the exact nuances, I guess, that's going on in the individual without
yeah,
the diagnostics and those types of things.
it's true, but I consider this a wild problem. Another wild problem would be like if someone came up to me and said, "Hey, Steve, should I get married?" Right? This isn't. There's no universal truth to this answer. It's going to
Yeah.
depend, right, on the person. There's going to be a lot of information that I should give to this person in order for them to maybe understand this. But if they trust me and my information, I should be allowed to tell them my thoughts on said thing, right?
Absolutely.
Should you get married? Should
Yeah.
I take Chris's supplement? Like whatever that thing is. So I do think we should have the leeway because we care about our clients' long-term health and wellness to tell them things. And one thing that has been really talked about in our community now is the active form of vitamins, right? That wasn't talked
Hmm.
about even 3 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly not. People did not know the difference. They go take a multivitamin, go take a
Yeah.
multivitamin. Now everyone's going, oh, look on the back of it. It's almost like the cool thing to do. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, look at this. Look what I know that you don't know. Look on the back of your
Right.
vitamin. Does it have the active version or the non-active version? Throw those vitamins out. So I do think there's sort of a groundswell for people in my community who are also talking about this, which then in turn helps people in your community, which is really the same community, people who care about health and wellness of the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were kind of positioned this way, but it took a longer time for it to get into kind of the general consumer discourse. But now you're seeing that just, a lot, again, the health IQ, the nutritional IQ of people continue to ratchet upward. And so, as I said, a lot of people are really looking for that and seeking us out because of that. And what we're doing on that front. And we're going to continue to push the envelope on that. We've learned a ton in our 9 years of being in business, and now have been working on this new formulation for almost 3 years to integrate a lot of that, because trying to do it through real food sources is not easy. But yeah, we found a way to unlock that and do that, which I'm excited to finally launch at some point later this year. And
Yeah,
I've got, this crazy database of all of our direct competitors, and it's a spreadsheet of every single vitamin, mineral, and nutrient where it comes from. And I can confidently say that, with our new formulation, and arguably even now, we are the cleanest, most complete solution to daily nutrition. Nothing else comes close.
Should you release that document?
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've got nothing to hide, and this is all public information, right? It's just looking at, their nutritional supplement facts, and digging into and being knowledgeable about, these sources, and being able to kind of see, okay, when we combine these elements, we, are able to achieve X result. So
It is interesting
yeah.
though, how a little bit of this is always luck. So if you were somebody in 1988 who was promoting, I don't know, organic bananas, no one's listening to you really at the time, right?
Right.
Or not that many people, right? You have a niche
Mm-hmm.
audience in whatever, Santa Barbara, California, but they're not listening to you in Nebraska and in Texas. I can promise you that. So there's just, you come around at the right time, and then now you have a lot of people, right? The Gary Breckas of the world and all these people. Some people are charlatans, and some people actually know what they're talking about, but everyone's talking about active vitamins now, and why one vitamin isn't the next vitamin. And you should really pay the extra money to get the better version of supplements. And sometimes it's just, by luck of whatever is in the current culture and climate that things can ignite.
Yeah, and not even coming around at the right time, just staying around for long enough, so that where that does start to come around. It's something non-related, but like you look at the Stanley water bottle, right? The company's been around forever, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, this thing goes viral and their business skyrockets as a result. So I think, and when you have really sound, I guess, business principles and core values, and I guess a longer term horizon for, business, then it allows you, I guess, to get luckier, if you will, over time, because there's just more opportunity as the, narrative kind of evolves and grows and changes.
Yeah, I forgot the exact saying, but luck is just people doing very good work for a long period of time until they get discovered, more or less, right? It's not actually luck. It's the inevitability of whenever you're going to get found out. Chris, this was great information. Let all my listeners know where they can find more about you and more about LyfeFuel.
Yeah, best place is through our website. That's just lyfefuel.com, lyfefuel.com. We've got an Instagram as well, if that's where people choose to engage. I personally am not a very active user of social media. I'm more focused on business and living life, outside of digital means. But all the information, we try to, have all that on the website. We've got a transformation program, which is really a holistic approach to wellness. So beyond like the physical products, anybody who's looking to make meaningful change, kind of, forego standard American diet, learn more about, these core pillars of wellness, can get started on that. It also includes the physical products that we make. And that's really the best place for people to start their journey with us.
My guest today has been Chris Manderino of LyfeFuel. Thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast.
Steve, thanks so much. Hope your listeners enjoyed the show.